Good morning, students. Welcome you all to this online lecture series on VLSI design. From this today's lecture, we are starting a new topic, that is VHDL statements. So we shall study various topics under this broad chapter of VHDL statements. So let's start this lecture. As you see on the slide, today we will take up three important topics, that is assignment statements, sequential statements and process. And at last we study with examples what are conditional statements. So let's start our first topic, that is signal assignment statements. So as you see on the slide, the first question that comes to our mind is that what are assignment statements? Now the basic definition of signal assignment statements says that these are the statements by which there is data flow through the entity inside a modeling style. What it means? It means that the signal assignment statements can also appear within or outside the body of a process statement. So we can say that a signal assignment statement can appear inside a process, that is sequential statement, or directly in an architecture, that is concurrent statement. Now what are the various types of assignment statements? There are basically two types. These are sequential signal assignment statements and concurrent signal assignment statements. Now the sequential signal assignment statements are those that appears within the body of a process statement, and the concurrent signal assignment statements are those that appear outside of a process. Now it must be noted that the concurrent signal assignment statements are always event triggered. This means these are executed whenever there is an event on a signal that appears in an expression. But on the other hand, the sequential signal assignment statements are not event triggered. This means the sequential signal assignment statements are executed in sequence to other sequential statements that appears within the process. So I hope you have now some understanding about these statements. Now let's discuss their difference. There are two major differences between these two types of statements. As you see on the next slide, the sequential signal assignment statements are basically something like those statements which are executed in the series of sequence, that is one by one. This means the sequential signal assignment statements are grouped using the process statements. As you observe the figure on the right, the concurrent signal assignment statements are those which happen to be outside of a process, and these are evaluated concurrently during the simulation stage of process. So this was the difference between these two, sequential and concurrent. I hope you have now thorough understanding of this topic of assignment statements. Now let's move to the next slide for the study of sequential statements and process. As you see in the slide on the right, the list of various sequential statements are shown. So first of all, very basic question, what are sequential statements? The definition of this sequential statement says that these are the statements which are executed sequentially. This means These are the statements which represents the behavior of the entity. Now these are the set of those sequential statements that are inside a process statement, which do not specify the structure of the entity. So what they actually specify? They actually specifies the functionality of the entity and not the structure of the entity. The list of various sequential statements as shown on the right, it comprises of various statements like process statement, if statement, case, loop, next, exit, wait, and assertion statements. Since these sequential statements are very important and are widely used in VHDL programming, we shall discuss these sequential statements with their syntax and suitable examples in the subsequent lecture, where we study in detail about these statements. Now let's know what is a process or a process statement. The process statement contains sequential statements that describes the functionality of a portion. The portion of what? The portion of an entity in sequential terms. It must be noted that every architecture in VHDL contains only one statement, which is called as a process statement. Also in the VHDL programming, the process statement starts at the line beginning with the keyword process and ends with the line that contains the keyword end process. Now what is important here is that all the statements between these two lines are considered as part of the process statement. Also we must note that all the statements enclosed by the process are sequential statements, and the order of the execution is the order of the statements in a process statement. Now the very important question is that what are the different modules of these process statements? Well, there are three basic modules of process statements as you see on the slide. These are process declaration region, process statement part, and process execution. The process declaration says that it is the process declarative part. Now what it means? It means this is the part which consists of area between the end of the sensitivity list and the keyword begin. And the process statement part of the process starts at the begin keyword and ends at the end process line. And the third, process execution, is that part where each statement in the process is executed sequentially. So this was the brief about these process statements. I hope you have now understanding of this topic of sequential statements and process. Let's study next topic of conditional statements. As you see on the slide, the very basic question is that what are conditional statements? The definition says that these are those statements whose process logic depends on one or more condition. So we must note that these conditions can be any Boolean expression which is inside the program. So conditional statements are used when we need to perform a choice or there is some condition. So we can say that when we want to do a selection between two or more choices, we use conditional statements in the VHDL programming. Now what is the basic nature of conditional statements? The basic nature of these statements is that these conditional signal assignment generally use when else or select construct logic inside the programs. But this must be kept in mind that since in VHDL in the concurrent form it provides two different solutions to implement a conditional statement, that is sequential conditional statement and concurrent conditional statement, which we studied earlier in today's lecture. Now let's take few examples for better understanding of conditional statements. As you see on the slide, an example of when else logic is shown. Here the program is executed as per logic that when z is equal to a when x is greater than 5, and z is equal to b when x is less than 5, and when x is equal to 5 then z is equal to c. In this way the when else conditional logic is applied. Now let's take second example of select condition. As you see on the right, now the program says that the parameter b is assigned different values for several possible values of a. That means using select logic, this logic is compressed as shown in the code. So here b is assigned different values such as 100, 0100, 0010 and 0001 for different values of a. So this logic is also elaborated in the program on the right without the select logic also. See the difference. So b is 100 when a is 00, else b is 0100 when a is 01, and so on. So what we understood from this example is that using the select conditional logic, the algorithm is very much compressed, and this difference becomes very important when we use algorithms with many variables and loops. Now we know that since the processing of the logical diagram or circuits increases or decreases as per the number of instructions in the algorithm. So these conditional statements plays a very vital role in the programming when there is some logical conditioning. I hope you have now understanding of this topic of conditional statements. Now this was all about today's lecture, where we completed 3 topics of VHDL statements, that is assignment statements, sequential statements, process and conditional statements. In the next lecture, as you see on the slide, we shall execute detailed study of various sequential statements. So we shall discuss these statements with suitable examples in the next lecture. Thank you.